You are not calm, you are undisciplined. And that truth makes people uncomfortable, because calm has become a costume, a word people use to hide exhaustion, avoidance, and emotional numbness. They say they are calm, but what they really mean is they've stopped trying. They've lowered their standards. They've accepted disorder and renamed it peace. Real calm is not passive. Real calm is controlled power. Most people don't have it. What they have is escape. They avoid conflict. They avoid pressure. They avoid responsibility. They avoid discomfort. And when avoidance becomes a lifestyle, the nervous system quiets down, not because it is strong, but because it has given up. That is not calm. That is surrender. A disciplined mind is calm because it is ordered. An undisciplined mind is quiet only when nothing challenges it. The moment pressure appears, the truth is exposed. Look closely at how most people react under stress. They snap, they panic, they freeze, they overthink, they scroll, they distract, they blame, they collapse internally while trying to look composed externally. That is not calm. That is fragility. True calm does not disappear when life gets loud. It becomes more visible. The calm of a trained mind is steady under chaos. It does not rush. It does not react emotionally. It does not seek relief. It seeks correct action. And that kind of calm is built, not assumed. The problem is that discipline has been misunderstood. People think discipline is aggression, force, harshness. They imagine shouting at yourself, punishing yourself, grinding endlessly. That's not discipline. That's insecurity pretending to be strength. Discipline is clarity. Discipline is hierarchy. Discipline is knowing who decides when things get uncomfortable. An undisciplined mind lets emotions decide. A disciplined mind lets principles decide. That difference determines everything. When people say they want calm, what they usually want is relief from pressure. But relief without structure makes you weaker. It lowers your tolerance. It shrinks your capacity. That's why people who avoid pressure become more anxious over time, not less. Anxiety grows where discipline is absent. Because without discipline, there is no predictability. Without predictability, the mind stays alert, scanning for danger, overwhelmed by uncertainty. Structure calms the nervous system. Clear routines, clear standards, clear non-negotiables. This is why disciplined people appear calm. Their mind knows what to expect. It knows what happens next. It knows who is in control. The undisciplined mind lives in constant negotiation. Should I do this? Should I wait? Should I quit? Should I distract myself? That internal debate never stops. And people confuse the exhaustion from that debate with stress from life. Life isn't stressing you out. Your lack of internal order is. You are not calm because you avoid conflict. You are calm only when you can endure it without losing yourself. That endurance comes from training. Training the mind to stay present when discomfort appears. Training it not to seek escape immediately. Training it to follow through even when emotion fluctuates. Most people never train this. They confuse calm with quiet. But quiet can be emptiness. Calm is steadiness. Steadiness under pressure. That is rare. This is why silence makes undisciplined people uncomfortable. Silence exposes the noise they've been avoiding, the self-doubt, the guilt, the unrealized potential, the broken promises to themselves. So they fill the silence. Videos, scrolling, talking. Anything to avoid being alone with their own mind. A disciplined mind seeks silence because silence sharpens awareness. Awareness reveals weakness. Weakness shows where discipline is needed. This is the cycle. You don't become calm by relaxing more. You become calm by confronting what you've been avoiding. Avoidance creates inner tension. Confrontation releases it. This is why discipline feels uncomfortable at first. It forces you to face resistance instead of running from it. But that discomfort is temporary. What comes after is stability. The undisciplined mind wants peace without effort. That kind of peace does not exist. Peace is the result of alignment. Alignment between what you know and what you do. When you know what's right but don't act on it, the mind fragments. That fragmentation creates restlessness, irritation, anxiety. People call it stress, but it's really self-betrayal. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, you fracture trust with yourself. Over time, that lack of trust makes the mind unstable. It doesn't believe you anymore, so it stays alert, anxious, restless. Discipline repairs that trust, not by doing everything perfectly, but by doing what you said you would do consistently. Consistency creates reliability. Reliability creates calm. That's why calm people are reliable. And unreliable people are never calm for long. They might look relaxed when nothing is required of them, but the moment responsibility appears, they crack. True calm shows up when something is at stake, when there is pressure, when there is risk, when there is discomfort, and you remain steady. That steadiness is earned through daily discipline in small, unglamorous moments. Waking up when you said you would. Acting when it's time, not when it feels good. Sitting with discomfort without reaching for escape. This is mental training. And like any training, it reshapes identity. You stop identifying as someone who reacts emotionally. You become someone who responds deliberately. You stop being controlled by mood. You become governed by principle. Principle is calm. Emotion is weather. If your calm depends on circumstances, it is not calm, it is convenience. The disciplined mind carries calm internally. It doesn't borrow it from external conditions. That's why disciplined people don't need perfect environments. They create stability wherever they go. And this is where people misunderstand monks, warriors, disciplined individuals. They see the stillness and think it comes from detachment. It doesn't. It comes from confrontation. They have faced their impulses, their fears, their excuses, their weaknesses. And instead of identifying with them, they trained past them. You cannot skip this process. Calm without discipline is fake. Discipline without calm is immature. True mastery is where discipline produces calm. That is the destination. But most people never start the journey because they mistake undisciplined numbness for peace. And as long as that confusion exists, growth is impossible. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to name. You are not calm. You are undisciplined. And that realization is not an insult. It is an invitation. An invitation to stop hiding behind comfort. To stop calling avoidance balance. To stop mistaking silence for strength. Real calm is built through order, repetition, and restraint. And that is where the real work begins. Discipline does not become real when you understand it. It becomes real when it starts to change how you see yourself. This is where most people fail. They hear the truth. They agree with it. They feel inspired for a moment. And then they return to the same identity. The same habits, the same reactions, the same excuses, just with better language. Nothing changes because identity stayed the same. An undisciplined identity will always sabotage disciplined actions. You can force behavior for a while. You can push yourself for days, even weeks. But if, deep down, you still see yourself as someone who quits, negotiates, delays, or avoids discomfort, the mind will eventually pull you back to alignment with that self-image. The mind always protects identity before progress. This is why resistance becomes stronger the moment discipline starts working. At first, resistance is loud and obvious. Laziness, distraction, procrastination. But later resistance becomes intelligent. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds like balance. You deserve rest. You've already done enough. Why push so hard? You don't need to be extreme. This is not wisdom. This is the old identity fighting for survival. Because discipline threatens comfort. And comfort is where the old identity lives. When discipline starts to solidify, the mind panics. Not emotionally, but strategically. It begins to bargain. It offers compromises. It reframes weakness as self-care. This is the most dangerous phase. Not chaos, not collapse, but comfort disguised as control. This is where people plateau. They don't fall apart. They don't quit completely. They just stop evolving. And stagnation feels calm until life demands more than you've prepared for. The disciplined path is not about intensity. It is about non-negotiables. Undisciplined people rely on motivation. Disciplined people rely on standards. Motivation changes daily. Standards do not. Standards remove decision-making. They eliminate internal debate. They create certainty. I don't feel like it becomes irrelevant when standards exist. This is how identity shifts. You stop asking how you feel. You start asking what is required. And requirement is objective. Emotion is not. At this stage, discipline begins to feel less like effort and more like alignment. You experience less friction because you are no longer arguing with yourself constantly. The internal noise decreases. Not because life is easier, but because you've reduced internal conflict. Conflict drains energy more than work ever will. This is why undisciplined people feel exhausted doing very little, while disciplined people can carry heavy loads with clarity. They are not fighting themselves, But understand this clearly: identity change is uncomfortable. You will feel like you are betraying your old self, your old routines, your old coping mechanisms, even your old relationships. Some people will no longer recognize you. They may say you've changed, and they will be right. Growth requires separation, not superiority. Separation. You cannot live a disciplined life while keeping undisciplined attachments untouched. The environment always pulls you back toward who you were. This is why disciplined individuals are selective. With time, with people, with information, with habits. Selectivity is not arrogance, it is protection. Every input shapes the mind. Every influence reinforces identity. If you allow chaotic inputs, expect chaotic thoughts. If you allow weak standards around you, expect weakened resolve. The disciplined mind understands this and acts accordingly. At this level, discipline becomes quiet. You stop talking about it. You stop proving it. You stop seeking validation for it. You simply live it. And this is where discipline becomes threatening to others. Not because you say anything, but because your presence reflects what they avoid. A disciplined person is a mirror, not intentionally, naturally. Your consistency exposes inconsistency. Your calm exposes chaos. Your restraint exposes indulgence. This makes people uncomfortable. Some will respect you silently. Others will criticize you subtly. A few will try to pull you back to who you used to be. This is not personal. It is psychological. People feel safer when others validate their habits. When you change, you remove that validation. Don't seek understanding. Seek alignment. Discipline does not need approval to function. This phase also reveals a hard truth. Discipline does not make life painless. It makes pain useful. You still feel resistance. You still feel fear. You still feel fatigue. But none of it is wasted. It all contributes to sharpening awareness and strengthening resolve. Undisciplined pain is chaotic and meaningless. Disciplined pain is purposeful. That difference changes how you experience difficulty. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what is this training me for? And training changes perspective. This is also where patience deepens. Not passive patience, active patience. The ability to wait without quitting, to progress without rushing, to build without needing constant reward. This patience stabilizes the mind further. Urgency fades. Not ambition, urgency. You stop chasing results emotionally. You trust process intellectually. That trust is earned through repetition. Day after day, action after action, standard after standard. This is where discipline becomes identity. You are no longer trying to be disciplined. You simply are someone who does what must be done. And that identity is heavy. Heavy with responsibility. Heavy with expectation. Heavy with self-respect. Once you carry it, you cannot unsee what undisciplined living costs. The chaos, the anxiety, the self-betrayal, the wasted potential. And you cannot go back, not comfortably. This is why discipline, once established, must be guarded. Because the higher you rise internally, the threats become. And that is what comes next. The final test of discipline is not struggle, it is stability. When chaos disappears, when life becomes predictable, when routines hold, when progress is visible, that is when discipline is most vulnerable. Because urgency fades, pain no longer forces awareness, pressure no longer demands structure, and the mind, relieved from survival mode, begins to relax its grip. This is where most disciplined people quietly fall. Not backward, sideways. They don't abandon standards. They soften them. They don't stop training. They reduce intensity. They don't lose control. They loosen vigilance. And slowly, the edge dulls. This happens because the mind is efficient. It wants to conserve energy. Once a pattern works, it assumes it can be maintained with less effort. That assumption is false. Order does not maintain itself. It must be renewed daily. The disciplined mind understands this and replaces urgency with ritual. Not motivation, not emotion, ritual. Ritual is action without debate. It is structure without drama. It is discipline that no longer needs force. This is the highest form of self-mastery. At this level, you no longer fight resistance. You prevent it. You don't ask, do I feel like doing this? You move before feeling speaks, because feeling is slower than habit. And habit, when designed intentionally, protects discipline automatically. This is also where humility becomes essential. Discipline creates strength. Strength attracts recognition. Recognition feeds ego. Ego seeks comfort and exception. I've earned a break. I've proven myself. I don't need to be so strict anymore. These thoughts are subtle. They don't feel like weakness. They feel like confidence. But confidence that forgets structure becomes arrogance. And arrogance is undisciplined confidence. The disciplined mind stays humble not by self-criticism, but by memory. Memory of who you were before order. Memory of the chaos discipline saved you from. Memory of how easily the mind lies when it wants comfort. This memory keeps standards sharp, not emotionally, strategically. This is also where silence becomes a necessity, not a luxury. Not silence from noise, silence from consumption. No constant input. No endless stimulation. No drowning awareness in distraction. Silence is where drift is detected. Without silence, decline feels normal. You don't need isolation. You need regular withdrawal. Time to observe your own behavior without justification. Time to ask uncomfortable questions. Where have I become lazy? Where have I lowered standards quietly? Where am I relying on past discipline instead of present action? These questions are uncomfortable and essential. This is why discipline at this stage becomes protective. You protect your mornings. You protect your routines. You protect your energy. You protect your attention aggressively, precisely. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overcommitting. You stop entertaining unnecessary complexity. Simplicity becomes strength, not because life is simple, but because complexity weakens focus. At this level, discipline is no longer visible as effort. It is visible as clarity. Your decisions are cleaner. Your speech is measured. Your actions are deliberate. People feel this, not as intimidation, as reliability. And reliability creates trust without performance. This is the quiet power discipline people carry. They don't dominate rooms. They stabilize them. They don't need to convince. They demonstrate. This is why true discipline is never loud. Noise is compensation. A disciplined mind does not need to announce itself. It simply shows up, again and again,